70 AD, Jerusalem. Roman legions surround the city like a tightening noose. Inside the walls, over 1 million people prepare for siege. But outside the city, across the Jordan River, a small group watches from the hills of Pella. Christians. They left everything, their homes, their businesses. Their neighbors called them insane, cowards, traitors. 4 months later, 1.1 million dead. The temple destroyed. Not one stone left on another. Every Christian at Pella survived. They had one advantage. Jesus told them exactly what to do 40 years earlier. One sign, one command. They saw it. They obeyed. They lived. That same sign is coming again. But this time, it won't be one city. It will be the entire world. And most believers won't recognize it until the door slams shut. Jesus gave the command once. He meant it twice. Most people read Matthew 24 looking for disasters. Jesus wrote it as a survival manual. There is a difference. And that difference will matter more than anything else in the days ahead. The disciples asked Jesus 3 questions on the Mount of Olives. When will the temple fall? What is the sign of your coming? What signals the end of the age? 3 questions. 1 answer. A precise, sequential briefing that most believers have heard but never fully understood. Jesus starts with wars, famines, earthquakes, nation rising against nation. Most people stop there. They build prophecy charts. They track headlines. They debate timelines. But Jesus does not stop there. He moves to something more alarming than global war. He moves to what happens inside the church. Betrayal, cold love, false prophets performing real miracles. He spends more time warning about deception than about disaster. And then, right in the middle of everything, he stops. He inserts a parenthetical that most readers skip in 3 seconds. Matthew 24:15. When you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Let the reader understand. Jesus pauses his own briefing to flag one specific moment, one specific event, one specific location. He does not say this about wars. He does not say this about famines. He does not say this about false prophets performing miracles. He says it about this. One sign, in one place. That triggers one command. And here is what most believers miss entirely. The command is not spiritual. It is not symbolic. It is not an invitation to pray more or trust harder. It is a physical, geographical, time-sensitive evacuation order. Matthew 24:16. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Flee. Present tense. Immediate. No conditions attached. Jesus does not say flee when you feel ready. He does not say flee after you have prayed about it. He does not say flee once your pastor confirms it. He says flee. The moment you see it. Move. But what exactly are they fleeing from? And what is this sign that demands instant, unconditional obedience? To answer that, you have to go back 600 years before the night Jesus sat on that hillside. You have to go back to a prophet named Daniel, a man who saw this exact moment in a vision and described it with surgical precision, because Jesus did not invent this prophecy on the Mount of Olives. He was quoting someone else. And what Daniel saw will change how you read everything happening in the world right now. 600 years before Christ was born, a man knelt in Babylon and prayed. His city had been destroyed. His people were in captivity. The temple was rubble. And Daniel was asking God one question: will you restore us? The answer he received was not just for his generation. It was a timeline for the entire human race. An angel named Gabriel appeared and gave Daniel a sequence of 70 weeks, not calendar weeks, prophetic weeks, each day representing 1 year, 70 weeks of years, 490 years total, a countdown clock for Israel, for Jerusalem, for the end of all things. The first 69 weeks were fulfilled with mathematical precision, from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem to the arrival of the Messiah. Scholars have calculated this down to the exact day. The prophecy hit its mark without a single error. But then the clock stopped. 69 weeks completed, 1 week remaining, 7 years, and a gap opened between them that has lasted over 2,000 years. That final week, that last 7 years, has not happened yet. Daniel 9:27 describes what triggers it. A prince will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. A global peace agreement, signed, celebrated, praised by the entire world as the solution to generations of conflict. For 3.5 years, the agreement holds. And then everything changes. In the middle of that final 7-year period, this prince does something that has only one historical parallel. He stops the sacrifices in the temple. He walks into the holy place, and he demands to be worshipped as God. That act, that specific moment, is what Jesus called the Abomination of Desolation. But here is what you need to understand right now. For this prophecy to be fulfilled, one thing must already exist. Something that does not exist today, but is closer to existing than at any point in the last 2,000 years. A rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Right now, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, an organization called the Temple Institute has already constructed the furniture, the priestly garments, the instruments of worship. Everything needed for temple sacrifice is prepared and waiting. The only thing missing is the building itself. And the political pressure to build it is growing louder every single year. The prophecy requires the temple. The temple preparations are already complete. The land sits in tension. The nations are watching. Daniel saw all of this from a prison in Babylon, 6 centuries before Christ. Jesus confirmed it on a hillside outside Jerusalem. And the final week has not started yet, which means there is still time. But not as much as most people think. The word abomination in Hebrew is shikutz. It means something so detestable, so morally repulsive, that it defiles everything around it. The ancient Jews used this word for idol worship, for the pollution of sacred space, for the ultimate act of blasphemy against God. Desolation means to make empty, to strip of all life, to leave completely hollow. Put them together, abomination of desolation, and you are describing one specific act, an idol, set up in the most sacred place on earth. That makes everything around it spiritually dead. This is not a metaphor. This is a blueprint, and it has happened before. In 167 BC, a Greek ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes marched into Jerusalem. He stopped the temple sacrifices. He erected a statue of Zeus in the holy place. He slaughtered a pig on the altar. He desecrated everything the Jewish people held sacred. The Jewish historian describes the reaction as collective horror. Priests fled. Families scattered. The temple, the heart of Jewish worship, became a place of defilement overnight. Antiochus Epiphanes was a preview, a dress rehearsal for what Daniel said was still coming. Because Jesus quoted Daniel in Matthew 24, and at the time Jesus spoke those words, Antiochus had already been dead for 200 years. Jesus was not describing the past. He was pointing to a future event that would make Antiochus look like a minor disturbance. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4 fills in the details. The man of lawlessness will be revealed. He will oppose and exalt himself above everything called God. He will set himself up in God's temple and proclaim himself to be God. Not a representative of God, not a prophet of God, God himself. This is the mask coming off. Before this moment, the world sees a peacemaker, a problem solver, a leader who finally brought stability to the most contested piece of land on earth. The covenant of Daniel 9:27 is celebrated globally. The world exhales. The crisis is over. And then, 3.5 years in, he walks into the temple. He stops the sacrifices. He stands in the holy place. And he announces that he is God. That announcement, that single act of blasphemy in that single location, is the trigger Jesus told his disciples to watch for. Not a political election, not a military invasion, not an economic collapse, a religious act, in a religious building, by a man the world already trusts. This is why Jesus said, "Let the reader understand." Because the most dangerous deception in human history will not look dangerous at first. It will look like salvation. It will look like peace. It will look like the answer to everything that was breaking the world apart. And then the mask comes off. And when it does, the window of escape opens. But that window will not stay open long, because something else is happening at exactly the same moment. Something visible, something military, something that removes every excuse for not understanding what is happening. Jesus built a dual confirmation system. He knew that some people would miss the spiritual sign, the temple, the blasphemy, the religious declaration. These things require context. They require understanding. They require someone paying attention to what is happening inside a building in Jerusalem. So he gave a second sign, one that nobody could miss. Luke 21:20. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Armies, plural, surrounding, not approaching, not threatening, surrounding. When the military encirclement of Jerusalem becomes visible to the naked eye, the clock is no longer ticking down. It has already expired. The spiritual sign and the military sign arrive together. One confirms the other. Both point to the same moment. Move. Now look at the world through this lens. The nations named in Ezekiel 38 as the coalition that converges on Israel in the last days read like a modern geopolitical map. Magog, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer, Beth Togarmah. Scholars have identified these as modern Russia, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Turkey, and Central Asian nations. Right now, those exact nations are in active military alliance. Russia and Iran have conducted joint operations. Turkey has shifted its foreign policy away from Western alignment. The coalition Ezekiel described 3,000 years ago exists today in functional, operational form. This is not a prophecy about the distant future. This is a prophecy about nations that are already armed, already aligned, already positioned. Israel sits at the center of the most watched piece of land on earth. Every major military power has assets in the region. The United States, Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, all of them watching the same city, all of them with strategic interests in what happens there. Zechariah 12:3 describes Jerusalem as a heavy stone that will burden every nation that tries to lift it. Every nation that touches it will be injured. The prophet wrote that verse 2,500 years ago. Jerusalem is still that stone. And when the armies finally surround it, the signal will be unmistakable. It will be broadcast on every news channel, every phone notification, every headline across the world. The believer who is watching will see both signs simultaneously. The religious blasphemy in the temple, the military encirclement outside the walls. Two confirmation systems firing at once. But here is the terrifying part. Seeing the sign is not enough. Knowing the prophecy is not enough. Understanding the timeline is not enough. Because the command that follows is the hardest thing Jesus ever asked a believer to do. Leave everything, right now, and do not look back. There is one thing you need to understand about Jesus before reading these verses. He never ran from anything. He walked into the wilderness to face Satan directly. He walked through crowds that wanted to throw him off a cliff. He stood before Pilate without a single word of self-defense. He went to the cross without resistance. Every moment of his earthly life was marked by absolute, unmovable courage, which makes what he says in Matthew 24:16 one of the most startling statements in all of Scripture. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. The man who never ran from anything is telling his people to run. That alone should stop you cold. Matthew 24 verses 17 to 18. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. In first century Israel, the rooftop was living space. People cooked there, rested there, kept valuables there. Jesus is saying, do not go back inside your own home to retrieve anything. The time it takes to run down the stairs and grab what you own is time you do not have. The cloak was not a fashion item. It was survival gear. Warmth at night, protection from elements. A man's cloak was one of his most essential possessions. Jewish law said a cloak taken as collateral had to be returned before sundown because a man needed it to survive the night. Jesus says, "Leave it." Matthew 24 verses 19 through 20. Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing in those days. Pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Every word matters here. Jesus is not speaking spiritually. He is speaking logistically. Winter travel on foot through mountainous terrain is dangerous. Sabbath restrictions in Jewish communities could slow or complicate movement. Pregnancy and nursing limit mobility and speed. He is describing a physical escape on foot through difficult geography under extreme time pressure. This is not a metaphor for spiritual endurance. This is a literal evacuation order with practical obstacles factored in. And then verse 21 tells you exactly why the urgency is absolute. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. The worst period in human history begins the moment the abomination is set up. Not weeks later, not months later, immediately after. The door between safety and catastrophe does not close slowly. It slams. And the believers who stop to think, to debate, to retrieve, to confirm, will still be inside when it does. There was a generation that faced this exact choice before. They made the right decision, and what they left behind tells you everything about what really matters when the moment arrives. Sometime around 66 AD, a warning came to the Christian community in Jerusalem. The historical accounts differ slightly on the details, but the core of what happened is documented by two early church historians, Eusebius and Epiphanius. Both record the same event. The Christians in Jerusalem received a signal. They recognized it as the warning Jesus had given them 4 decades earlier on the Mount of Olives. And they left. Not some of them, the community. They crossed the Jordan River. They moved northeast into the Decapolis region. They settled in a small Gentile city called Pella, in what is now modern Jordan. They left behind homes built over generations, businesses, property, community standing, social connections, everything that made Jerusalem feel like home. Their neighbors thought they were insane. The political situation inside Jerusalem was actually improving at the time they left. Jewish resistance fighters were organizing. There was momentum. There was talk of victory against Rome. Staying felt like the rational choice. Leaving felt like surrender. They left anyway, because they had already decided. Not in the moment of crisis. Before it, they had read the words of Jesus. They had taken them literally. And when the signal came, the decision was already made. There was nothing left to debate. 4 months after the Christians reached Pella, the Roman general Vespasian began his campaign. His son Titus took command and completed the siege. The historian Josephus, an eyewitness, records over 1.1 million dead inside the walls of Jerusalem, 1,100,000 people, famine, disease, internal faction fighting, and finally, Roman execution on a mass scale. The temple was burned. The stones were torn apart by Roman soldiers searching for gold that had melted into the cracks during the fire. Every stone removed and thrown down, exactly as Jesus had described on the Mount of Olives 40 years earlier. Not one Christian died in that siege. Not one. Because not one Christian was inside the city when it happened. Now here is what most people miss about the Pella story. 70 AD was not the fulfillment of Matthew 24 verses 15 to 22. It was a preview, a historical dress rehearsal. The language Jesus uses in Matthew 24:21 goes far beyond anything that happened in 70 AD. The worst tribulation in all of human history has not happened yet, which means the command has not been fully executed yet, which means there is a generation still coming that will face this exact moment again. But this time, there will be no 4 months of lead time, no gradual Roman advance, no political warning signals building over years. When the abomination appears, the window opens and closes in hours. The Pella believers had weeks to prepare and move. The generation that faces the real fulfillment will not have that luxury, which raises the only question that actually matters right now. What happens to those who do not flee? Matthew 24:21. Read it slowly. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. Jesus is not describing a difficult season. He is not describing economic hardship or political persecution. He is describing something that has no historical equal, no parallel, no precedent in all of recorded human history. Something worse than the Black Death that killed 1/3 of Europe. Something worse than 2 world wars combined. Something worse than every genocide, every famine, every natural disaster that humanity has ever endured. And then verse 22 removes any remaining uncertainty about the scale. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. No human being, not no believer, not no Jewish person, no human being on earth would survive if the period ran its full course. This is the only event in all of Matthew 24 that Jesus describes as potentially extinction level. God shortens it, not because the judgment is incomplete, because there would be nothing left to save if he did not. Zechariah 13:8 gives a specific number for what happens in the land of Israel during this period. 2/3 of the population will be cut off and perish. Only 1/3 will survive. The prophet wrote those words 2,500 years ago. The book of Revelation describes this period across 13 chapters. Seal judgments, trumpet judgments, bowl judgments, each sequence more severe than the last. Oceans turning, water supplies failing, darkness covering regions, unprecedented catastrophe released in waves across the earth. This is what the evacuation order is protecting believers from. Not inconvenience, not social shame, not the discomfort of leaving behind what feels familiar and safe. Extinction-level catastrophe that begins the moment the abomination is set up and does not relent until Christ himself returns to stop it. Now understand something critical. Fleeing is not cowardice. Fleeing is obedience. The Son of God who went to the cross without flinching is the same one issuing the evacuation order. He is not telling his people to run because they cannot handle suffering. He is telling them to run because he has already absorbed the cost of their rescue. This is not retreat. This is strategic obedience to a command issued by the highest authority in the universe. The believers who stay will not be heroes. They will not be martyrs in the traditional sense. They will be casualties of a judgment not directed at them that they walked into by ignoring the command of Jesus. He told them to go. They stayed. That distinction matters eternally. But here is what no one explains after delivering the evacuation order. Where exactly are they supposed to go? Because fleeing into the mountains without a destination is not a plan. It is panic. And Jesus does not leave his people without a destination. The refuge was prepared before the crisis, hidden in plain sight in 3 separate books of the Bible. A location so specific that scholars have identified it. A place so remote that armies cannot easily reach it. A place where God promises to supernaturally sustain his people for exactly 1,260 days, 3.5 years, the exact length of the tribulation period. That is not a coincidence. Revelation 12:6, 1 verse, hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. The woman in Revelation 12 represents Israel, the remnant, the people who recognized the sign and obeyed the command. They flee into the wilderness, not randomly, not desperately, into a place already prepared by God before the crisis began. 1,260 days, exactly 42 months, exactly 3.5 years, the precise duration of the Great Tribulation period. The refuge matches the crisis perfectly, not approximately, exactly. Verse 14 of the same chapter adds one detail that changes everything. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished. Wings of a great eagle. In the Old Testament, this is the specific language God uses to describe his own supernatural protection of Israel during the Exodus. Exodus 19:4. I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. God is not sending his people into the wilderness to survive on their own resources. He is transporting them, protecting them, sustaining them supernaturally for the entire duration of the tribulation period. But where is this wilderness refuge? 3 separate passages point to the same location. Isaiah 63:1. The prophet sees the Messiah coming from Bozrah at the moment of his return. Who is this who comes from Edom, in crimsoned garments from Bozrah? The Messiah is traveling from Bozrah toward Jerusalem at the second coming, which means his people are in Bozrah when he arrives to rescue them. Micah 2:12. I will surely gather all of you, O Jacob. I will surely bring together the remnant of Israel. I will bring them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock in its pasture. The place will throng with people. One who breaks open the way will go up before them. The gathering place before the breakthrough. The pen before the pasture. Bozrah is the ancient name for the region of modern Petra in southern Jordan. A city carved into rose-red sandstone cliffs in the middle of the desert wilderness. Narrow entrance passages called Sikh that allow only small numbers through at a time. Natural walls hundreds of feet high. A water source inside the canyon, capable of sheltering a significant population from outside military force. 3 prophets, 3 independent witnesses, all pointing to the same canyon in the Jordanian desert. God did not design the refuge after the crisis began. He carved it into the earth before human civilization existed, and then told 3 different prophets to point toward it across 8 centuries of history. The destination was settled long before the evacuation order was issued, but knowing the destination does not mean you are prepared to move when the moment comes, because the greatest obstacle to obedience has never been information, it has never been geography, it has never been logistics. It is the decision you have not made yet. The Pella believers did not make their decision when the Roman legions appeared on the horizon. They made it 40 years earlier, on a hillside, listening to a man describe events that would not happen in their lifetime. They heard the words, they believed them, they held them, and when the moment finally came, the decision was already settled. That is the only reason they survived. Not superior faith, not better theology, not more resources or better connections. A decision made in advance, before the pressure arrived, before the cost became visible, before every instinct screamed at them to stay. The worst moment to make a decision is inside the crisis, because inside the crisis, everything conspires against clear thinking. Your possessions look more valuable than they are. Your community feels more irreplaceable than it is. The risk of leaving feels greater than the risk of staying. Every emotion pulls toward the familiar. Jesus knew this, which is why he gave the command decades before it would be needed, so that the decision could be made in stillness, in clarity, before the pressure arrived. The generation that will see the abomination of desolation is alive right now, or they will be born within the next generation. The temple preparations in Jerusalem are not theoretical. The geopolitical alignments are not symbolic. The convergence of prophetic markers is not coincidental. Something is building. Every serious student of Scripture can feel it. The birth pains Jesus described in Matthew 24 are not beginning. They are accelerating, which means the final week of Daniel is closer today than it has ever been, which means the generation that faces the abomination of desolation may be closer than anyone is comfortable admitting, and that generation will need a decision already made, a commitment already settled, a trust in the words of Jesus that runs deeper than instinct, deeper than fear, deeper than everything accumulated in a lifetime of building what feels like security. The Pella believers left homes, businesses, neighbors, everything that made Jerusalem feel permanent. They crossed a river into foreign territory because a man told them to 40 years earlier, and every single one of them watched from across the Jordan, while everything they left behind turned to ash. They did not mourn what they lost. They recognized what they kept: their lives, their families, their future. Because they trusted the words of the one who sits above every government, every military, every geopolitical alliance, currently maneuvering around the most contested city on earth. He told them exactly what was coming. He told them exactly what to do. He told them where the refuge was before the crisis existed. He withheld nothing. The sign in Jerusalem will appear. The armies will surround the city. The window will open. And in that moment, every person watching will face the same question the Pella believers faced 2,000 years ago. Do you trust what he said more than what you can see? There is a second part to this story that most believers have never heard. What happens inside that wilderness refuge during those 1,260 days? What God does for the people who obeyed? What arrives at the end of that period that makes everything they left behind look like nothing at all? That is where this goes next.